Hello all, welcome to What's Possible Fall 2021. I'm gonna wait and let everyone get in. Still some people trickling in. We're gonna give it another minute. Well, hi all, I'm Kayla Nick-Kearney. I'm the president of HPPA. And I'm hoping that my background is not as backwards as it looks to me right now. But I'm the 2021 president of HPPA Hornets Policy and Politics Alumni Chapter for Sac State. And we are honored to put on the What's Possible Fall 2021 panel on housing solutions. And we do this panel twice a year, and the intent is to bring people together, especially people that wouldn't be having these conversations as a unit, and both give some context to and give some ideas out there to the world of ways, creative solutions, new ideas, policy ideas that maybe need some softening up, and kind of start that conversation, see where things can go and see what's possible. So in years previous, we have held events also on housing, on education equity, on voters' rights and technology. And today we get to discuss housing options, especially housing the unhoused communities during one of the biggest housing crises we've seen, right? So I'm going to introduce Kendra Lewis. She is the executive director of the Sacramento Housing Alliance, and she's going to give us some context. That way we know exactly what we're discussing when our panelists break into their expertise. Thank you, Kendra, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this discussion today. I'm very thankful for the invitation and to speak, and humbled that my words do matter. I'm Kendra Lewis, and I'm the executive director of the Sacramento Housing Alliance. Since 1989, our organization, our board of directors, our members and volunteers have been dedicated to advocacy for safe, stable, accessible, and affordable homes in the Sacramento region. We do this through education, leadership, and policy change. We believe that housing is a human right. And I'm here today to start this conversation today to explore the question of what is possible. And it was very interesting that the question was asked. And I'm glad that that is the title that is used for this, because for the crisis that we're in around housing, asking something so dreamy and pie in the sky as what's possible is good for someone like me in an organization like ours. It's a bold question, and I love it because I'm an eternal optimist. I believe that people are really the change, and I do believe that anything is possible, and that possible can be good and bad. Where we are in history in our region and state as it relates to housing and the crisis is both unfortunate, yet a bold opportunity to make revolutionary change. In January of 2020, Governor Newsom was ready to take on the housing crisis, and as boldly before any governor before him. And within 60 days, we were in a full-fledged pandemic, bringing any new policy or opportunities to a grinding halt. What the pandemic exposed in housing and in every tier of society, but in housing and economic disparity, was the housing and economic disparity is even worse than imagined. So in real time, in a real historical moment, we ask, how do we fix this? How or what's possible? If you're asking what's possible, then you must be bold, you must have courage, and you must offer no retreat, my opinion. When you ask the question, what's possible, you must take full and complete assessment of the current situation. And should we continue with the status quo, or do we need bold innovative and revolutionary change? When we look at this housing crisis in California, it is very complex. But now is the opportunity to be courageous and not just look look at what is in front of us. In this very wealthy state, in this nation, in the 5th largest economy in the world, we don't have an option but to ask what is possible and do the impossible for what folks think is really impossible. Can we fix this problem? Right now is the time for the best and the brightest and the bold to look at the opportunity of figuring out how to use commercial buildings, for more inventory in our community. Now is the time to be bold and make decisions. To be bold and make a declarative statement that housing is a human right and that we demand policy and resources to back it up. When you ask what is possible with housing, you look at the horror of the racist and segregated past, and some of the racism in the present. And we must destroy any remnants that remain with us today, because it is still in the way and it creates barriers in ways that we oftentimes don't see. I come to you today very excited about what's next. We have the opportunity to step up and become the trailblazers of what's possible in housing in California. What I do think and believe is we can do this because we have nothing else to lose. We are in a crisis in ways that we had never seen before. And now all of you are going to start talking about the new ideas, the dreams. The Sacramento Housing Alliance is in the process of planning for 2022. And we are asking that question: what is possible? What bolder moves can we make? What other resources can we find? What bigger partners can we bring in to ensure that everybody in our region and be the model for the state? We have the luxury, and at times people may not think that, of being in the capital city. So we have access to the legislature, we have access to the minds, we have access to the thinkers and the doers. And so today is really just a continuum of what we've been talking about for the years. And I'm very glad that this panel has come together. I'm glad I was asked, because we often don't get asked that question, what's possible? Oftentimes people come to us to focus on what's wrong and how we can't get past it. So anything's possible. And so I thank you for the opportunity to come to you today to really think about that question. I think that we've realized that in this pandemic that we have to do things very differently. And I think there's so many opportunities and to just push beyond the comfort zone that we're used to being in as it relates to housing. We don't have to do the status quo, but we have to do better and we have to do more. Every single day, people are suffering in ways that we've never seen before. And our organization, myself and our partners, have been committed to every day that we can be bold and courageous and find a way that gives dignity to our brothers and sisters in the community to ensure that everybody has a safe and affordable home. So thank you for this opportunity. And I'm very excited to find out what is possible with this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kendra. Really appreciate that. Next, we're going to have Liam Dillon introduce all of our panelists. He has been covering housing since 2016 for the Los Angeles Times and has worked around that after graduating from Georgetown University. Liam, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. I've been writing, as Kayla said, I've been writing about housing for the LA Times for the past 5 years. I'm now based in Los Angeles, but I spent close to 3 years, actually a little more than 3 years, working out of our state capitol bureau in Sacramento. And so I'm familiar both with the city and some of the state politics surrounding housing issues. And I think it's usually best, or I find it best, if folks on the panel introduce themselves. And so, Patience, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Thanks, Liam. My name is Patience Milrod. I'm the Executive Director for Central California Legal Services. So we serve the poorest people in the 6 counties between Merced and Tulare Kings, and up into the foothills, Tuolumne and Mariposa counties. Probably something like 70%, before the pandemic, 70% of our caseload was people getting evicted. And so the people Kendra serves are my clients, and yes, they are more desperate now than ever. So yeah, and I'm looking forward to hearing what ideas surface here, because one of the things lawyers can do sometimes is blow the doors open so that the policy advocates can go in and make changes. So we're on board for that. Thank you.
Okay, and next, Sohab.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sohab Mehmood. I'm with the California Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm specifically within the Housing Policy Division. And then within that, I'm in our Land Use and Planning Unit. I oversee, in broad terms, our technical assistance program. We call it Technical Assistance on Accelerating Housing Production, but basically what it's focused on, providing cities and counties with the resources that they need to plan for housing, and that it includes addressing anything from zoning barriers to entitlement to permit processes to CEQA to design standards. My program is solely focused on trying to find the right resources, whether it be funding, whether it be giving cities and counties subject matter expertise, helping and address capacity gaps in planning staff and planning departments, and in addition, helping address community pushback, whether it be with the general public or it be with local elected officials, and giving cities and counties the tools that they need to address the pushback, and help educating also local elected officials on housing laws, but also the need for those housing laws and why we have them. So I oversee that program. That program also includes the planning grants, pro housing, different incentive programs, and housing elements.
Okay, and last but not least, Bruce. Bruce, you're on mute.
You know, after 20 months of this, you'd think you remember, right? Hi, my name is Bruce Monighan, and as background, I am an architect. I established a private practice in 1982 and ran that until I joined the city of Sacramento in 2014. The city of Sacramento, I am titled as the urban design manager. That position, I oversee design review and preservation activities. But as importantly, I'm also part of policy makers and policy reviewers. I work with the environmental group, the long range planning group, work with other departments in the city like public works and transportation, specifically to deal with issues related to urban design, creation of places, and the big concentration in the last several years, actually since I joined the city, has been related to housing, our housing policies, and the streamlining of those policies. So that's what I want to talk about today.
All right, so we are going to have some audience Q&A at the end. If you have a question, please drop it into the chat, and hopefully we can address it towards the end of our discussion. Just in general, the way I like to run these panels is, I may direct a question to someone individually, but most of these are going to be kind of free flowing, and hopefully we can just kind of get a good ongoing conversation going. And so in kind of that spirit, I want to open it up to everyone, and anyone who wants to answer first, please be my guest. But kind of as a table setting question here, what does everyone think the biggest underlying cause of the state's housing and homelessness problems?
Well, you can't get past the big question of cost. There were earlier generations that were able to establish wealth through real estate ownership, owning a home. And as we've gone from generation to generation, that's become harder and harder. We went through a terrible recession that caused a lot of people to move from home ownership to rentals. And it's clear we've not been able to build enough units in this state, period, to be able to house people. And the cost of that development of those homes becomes ever more expensive, and it makes it a much more difficult goal to attain. If without public funding, without public participation, housing costs are really, really difficult to achieve. So we have a broad spectrum of the community that is not able to achieve even the most basic, most necessary kind of shelter and housing. And so it's a broad program from people who have nothing over their head to people that can't afford the places that they actually do live in.
Oh, Liam, what a loaded question. I think, from what I've seen, my job is to outreach to all the cities and counties across the state and also talk to regional governments. And what I've seen a very, very common thread of amongst rural, urban, suburban, lower resource jurisdictions, higher resource jurisdictions is you could give us the planning support. You could even give us the financing for affordable housing units. But if we don't have the public support, then these projects are going to get shot down. And so oftentimes some cities will have the resources they need to get projects through to planning commission or to city council, and developers may have all the financing put together to get these projects built. But then whether it be the local elected officials or the community in fear of what housing means for their status quo in their environment, these projects get turned down, or they get held up for so long in this process, this public participation process for year, 2 years, 3 years, that they lose the developer loses the funding to finance it as an affordable unit. And so what I've seen, like the biggest thing is, even if we put all these pieces together, the planning side, the financing side, subsidizing the construction piece of it, subsidizing rents, if we don't have support, if there is no support, then we're going to be making very small movements to getting to where we need to be.
So Sohab, you have teed up exactly the difficulty that we see. So racism, as Kendra mentioned earlier, is baked in to our built environment, deeply baked in. And those homeowners who show up at city council or planning commissions with the pitchforks and torches, I mean, they are all about, I don't want those people living in my neighborhood. And the zoning that has proliferated across, certainly as we've suburbanized, tends to be large lot zoning. And what is that about? Well, we live in an environment where I'm not telling anybody anything they don't already know, but I just need to say this out loud. In our society, race and income map on each other pretty not, it's not a total identity, but there's a big, huge overlap in that Venn diagram. And it is no accident. We're in the middle of litigation with a small city in our catchment area that is over 50% white, when our whole catchment area is over 50% Latino. And in addition, there's African Americans and Asians in significant proportions. So our expert witness in our case has said to the judge, and the judge has agreed with us, that this doesn't happen by accident. This doesn't happen by accident. This white preference is an artifact of decisions that elected officials make and have been making for generations. So we are looking at a deeply contentious problem that's going to require complicating the matter also is the fact that the state has given such almost total control over land use entitlements to local governments. And they love that. I mean, here in the Central Valley, it is a developer-driven politics. I can't imagine it's very different anywhere else. So the local jurisdictions are very jealous of that prerogative, and They don't want to, they definitely don't want the state telling them what to do.
Yeah.
But short of political will and courage on a local level, which, I mean, I don't know. I love Kendra's optimistic view of the world, but I'm not holding my breath about that. Or legislated, you know, yeah, no, I mean, that improvements in the housing element law, that's great. It's not enough, because without a real hammer, and we're happy to be that hammer, but we're a small organization, we need help. So yeah, that community racism is the challenge to increasing the supply of affordable housing. And as the supply of affordable housing has dropped over the last 50 years, homelessness has taken off. And so it's economics 101. Okay, now I'm gonna shut up.
Yeah, I want to add to what Patience said. Not only do we have a broad racial discrimination, we have an economic discrimination. I have heard the most vile comments when working with affordable housing from neighborhoods of who they don't want living in their neighborhood. And beyond the racist kind of comments, there's we don't need poor people in our neighborhood. So this economic discrimination against people who have less than are already there is significant. And to add to what Patience said about local control, the state has been working actively over the last 5-6 years sessions of creating new controls so that local jurisdictions cannot deny people the ability to build homes. Now, it is something that all communities hold, you know, dearly, that they get to do their own zoning. And I think Sacramento, while we're a little city in a region in a big state, has been incredibly progressive. When SB 35 came out about ministerial housing approval, we created—
Bruce, I'm gonna stop you just so that I can explain, give people the explanatory comment on what SB 35 is. So this was a law that was passed in 2017 that essentially allows developers in cities that are behind on their housing goals, and we'll get into what housing goals are in a little bit, that are behind on their housing goals, the ability to basically walk into a city and pull a permit rather than having to go through a big sort of involved process if their particular housing project is a certain amount set aside for low income residents. So anyway, keep going.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, if a project meets objective zoning standards within the community and objective design standards, then the local community has to approve it. Well, there's some ties that go along with that as far as qualifying. And Sacramento at the same time created a Sacramento ministerial process that had less restrictions on it. And the beauty of this is we've seen 7 projects in the last year and a half go through this process because it eliminates public hearing. It has it's not exactly an exclusion from CEQA, but is deemed CEQA compliant if it's compliant with local standards. And it limits the amount of public hearings that can be, you know, on any particular project. And what we've seen is going from the difficulty of an affordable housing project that was a staff level review and should have been approved in, you know, 3 or 4 months, taken a year and a half, to one not far away from it using our ministerial process that it got approved in 3 months. So it takes will, it takes the desire to streamline and take out the obstacles from a local jurisdiction. And while not all local jurisdictions are on board, it's my belief that the more local jurisdictions drag their feet on approving housing, the more requirements we're going to see from the state in bills relative to housing production and housing streamlining. And Sacramento's been an early adopter. They've been bold. We've gotten a fair amount of pushback from community and community members who don't like the fact that they don't now get to control the process. But we've got housing moving at a really quick rate. And to Liam's statement, I don't think that there's anybody in the state of California that's meeting their housing goals. So everybody is in this position of needing to comply with essentially the elements of SB 35 and 330.
So I had some other kind of questions planned to start with, but I think there's an interesting theme going on here that I'd like to explore a little bit more that multiple folks have spoken to as it relates to public participation. You know, I think, and please correct if if I am wrong, no one here is saying that it's like public participation is bad, right? Or like we should not have the public participate in sort of their local government, right? Or democracy, right? I think, but the question I think that you're all kind of circling around is who gets to participate and how they get to participate, and whose voice is heard and whose voices are not heard. And I'll just give a brief, you know, reflection before I covered been covering housing at the state level. I covered local government in San Diego, and there were so many meetings that occurred at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, right, where all these decisions were being made. And who, of course, is available to come and talk at meetings that are at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday? It's people who are, you know, have enough time that they can do it themselves, and people who are wealthy enough to hire other people to go there for them, right? And so when those are the folks that are kind of coloring these conversations, you get to certain kind of outcomes where folks who are working 2 or 3 jobs aren't able to participate in this way, and who could blame them, right? And so I wonder maybe if there's some kind of meditation, if anyone wants to raise on the public participation process and how you think that could be made better to align with some of the housing outcomes that the state may need, particularly for its neediest residents.
Yeah, I think I could just speak on, you know, 2 things, Liam, that you pointed out. One thing that we always try to encourage, and we're trying to do now, although it might be a little too late in the game, is do the planning up front so the project can be approved later on. What that means is when you're establishing zoning for housing, multifamily, duplexes, triplexes, single family, do that planning up front with your community in a way so that when these projects come through, it's not going on a project by project basis where every project's going through a public hearing process. And then also every project is going through, well, I don't like that color. Well, why is it on that part of the street? Or why is it, you know, why does it look like this? Or how many units does this have? If you do that planning up front as a local government with your community, then it can kind of avoid some of this project by project opposition that cities are getting every time. Another thing that Bruce mentioned is, you know, there are laws that are, I can imagine, are going to start coming forward that are not going to allow for projects or enable projects to be going through this project by project community approval process. For example, SB 35, if you meet certain standards, project can go right through at a local level without having to face potential community opposition. But another part to your question is, yes, we want public participation, but I think what I've seen in housing elements and in general, the way cities and counties, but also organizations are trying to engage the community is not in a way where it's reaching those communities that are going to be most impacted by the housing crisis, the affordability crisis, and by these housing elements, right? We're talking about lower income households. We're talking about special needs households. We're talking about people of color. We're talking about large families, small families, people with, you know, a lot of veterans, seniors, a lot of diverse needs. And the way that I'm seeing engagement strategies work, it's not targeting those communities, and the strategies are not being, you know, molded to really address to reach those communities, right? So how we talk about planning and housing elements can be very technical. And how do you engage people of communities where that's not their background, that's not their understanding? And also when you're working 2-3 jobs, how are you going to sit there and try to learn what this topic is? And sometimes I see that sometimes the way we are communicating on planning and housing, we do it in such a technical way on purpose. I've seen that being used as a way to keep out the communities that are most affected by this crisis. And so the biggest things that we're advising, encouraging, and ourselves at the state are developing is actual flyers, fact sheets, videos that make sense to people who don't
Right.
have this background, that people who don't speak English or is English as a second language or haven't received that college education or don't have the time to sit there and open up a urban planning book and actually understand these laws and topics. So I think one of the biggest things is trying to develop engagement strategies that really work to the communities that a lot of the housing element and a lot of these housing laws are trying to address.
You know, that's spot on. I often accuse architects of talking in archaspeak because they think it makes them feel better, but nobody understands what they're saying. We as a planning organization tend to do the same thing. You have a lot of people who are very technically astute, and it's hard to get that to a language where everybody understands, which is then you end up adopting policies, and then the policies are implemented and people start developing by those policies, and the community goes, whoa, 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 what are you doing? That's not what we thought we were going to get. So the community, although they were, quote, engaged, when the project actually hits, they're surprised, and then they want to debate every policy or every project. You know, Oregon has this really interesting process where they do the statewide planning and then they do the local planning. And once those plans are set, it's assumed that anything that happens within the parameters of those plans are okay, they're approved. And we have a slightly different process in this state that doesn't have that kind of process. And therefore you end up looking at, you know, let's say the policies aren't defined well enough and each project becomes malleable. And then you end up having to debate every project. I think that because we're going through our 2040 general plan, we just approved the housing element. One of the things that we understand, and I want to add to this, there has been a real shift in the leadership in the city for the last 2 years to really understand, engage, and adopt the concerns of racial and economic injustice, and understand the communities that we're not reaching, we're not dealing with, that we haven't helped. You know, there's a lot of concentration on downtown and nothing out in, you know, the north area out in Rio Linda. And so the processes that we're going through now actively seek out the people who have characteristically not had a voice. And the outreach process is multifaceted so that you can reach a lot of different people. We used to mail to to owners of property. Now we mail to tenants of property, right? Owners and tenants. And the difference is stunning, because when you're talking to a person who's a renter in a property being impacted by new development, that's a whole lot different than, you know, informing an owner who might be not even in the state. And so we've become aware as a public organization that there are people without voices and people that don't understand how to have a voice, and they are drowned out by communities and community activists who are well-educated, wealthier, and have time to participate. And so from a policy standpoint, we have to change who we seek to engage and how we engage them, and make it understandable and give them an opportunity and be proactive about it, not just throw something out there and say, what do you think? You have to go out and get that community to talk. And it's a different perspective from us from a policy standpoint.
The other thing that contributes to this whole dynamic is a lot of small cities have been incorporated as the white fringe alternative to the center city. And so when those small cities do their let's say they do robust advanced planning, but are they planning for multifamily housing? No, they're not, because everyone knows that means poor people, and poor people, frankly, means people of color. So, you know, yes, it's an economic discrimination, but really it's a lot about race, no matter how you frame it. So the people who are not engaged and whose voices really do need to be heard are people who want to come to live in those neighborhoods of opportunity, but they're not considered constituents. I mean, even in the best of times, I feel like my clients are not really anybody's constituents, but certainly my Fresno City clients are not constituents of the Clovis City Council. And so that question, I totally agree with what Sohab and Bruce have said, but this is really about not just engaging the people who live within the jurisdiction, but also figuring out if we're going to increase the supply of affordable housing, and we're going to make sure that we bring life to the statement that housing is a human right, then that means reaching out beyond. And that's that's radical. That is not
Right.
Our politics aren't designed for that. Our politics actually are designed to not do that, right? So that's a huge challenge that, again, I don't see a remedy for it unless we're talking about some kind of state legislation. And all the city council members I know, it gives them hives when you talk about it.
This is good. I do want to change gears for a moment because I want to make sure that we address this particular point issue, because I think it's the most kind of proximate and concerning in terms of where we are right now within, still ongoing pandemic and the economic and both economic and health fallouts from that. And I want to ask this to start with patience with this. Once the pandemic began, I guess now we're going on 18 months, getting close to 2 years. There was a lot of fear that economic hardship that was come as a result would lead to this wave of evictions statewide, sort of somewhat different than what happened in 2008 and the recession, when there was all this wave of foreclosures. Now the big concern was this wave of potential evictions. So there were federal, state, and local policymakers, kind of passed a series of overlapping eviction protections, many of which, particularly here in California, have recently expired. And so, Patience, I know you kind of worked through dealing with all of this, and I guess, can you tell us kind of what of these protections worked, what worked, and what did not work over the past 18 months?
Not much worked well. And really, everybody is dancing as fast as they can. There's a lot of money coming down the pike. Nobody knew quite how to spend it. Cities that didn't have any experience serving low-income individuals, like serving them, they didn't have the infrastructure to get the ERAP money out. The moratoria, trying to exercise one's right to protection under any of these various bizarre and Byzantine schemes. Not for the faint of heart. Do not try this at home, boys and girls. Really, really complicated. You have to give us notice by a certain date. It has to include certain things. And if you don't do it, and the landlord's supposed to give you a notice, but of course, the landlords may or may not do that, and they may say they did, but they didn't. And then it's very complicated. And what we found is that lots of landlords were like, you're not paying me the rent. I don't care if you gave me this notice. What notice? You're not paying me the rent. And so, you know what? Your car is parked on your lawn. I'm evicting you for that. Or your kid who's been living with you in this apartment for the last 6 months, like all of a sudden, oh, that's a violation of the lease. I'm evicting you for that. And so we were plenty busy with these pretextual evictions, and I bet Kendra knows exactly what I'm talking about. And all over the place, all over our catchment area. And we are a particularly poor region. So what's considered affordable housing in our region is like, there are no units that exist at that rental rate anywhere else in the state. That's a slight exaggeration, but it is, people are really, really poor. And they are still paying significantly in excess of 50% of their income for housing. So the protections work very poorly. We have been the White House did a wonderful seminar and a couple of webinars about eviction diversion. And they invited 25, they focused on 25 municipalities, of which Fresno was one. And they invited the city government, they invited the courts, they invited legal aid, and they invited CBOs who were working in the housing space. And so we dutifully showed up, legal aid, our CBO partners. There was somebody, I don't think they were a clerical person in the city structure, but they were not the mayor, and nobody from the court. So the effort the White House was making was was to seed the idea of an eviction diversion program where before you actually, but if you want to serve an eviction notice on somebody, even before you get to the court process, that takes you, before you do that, you've got an opportunity to go and drag your tenant with you so that the ERAP payments, that
The funding, the rental assistance funding, yeah.
Emergency rental assistance payments can make their way directly to the landlord. So that stabilizes the tenant's housing. It gives the landlord some income so they're not looking at foreclosure. And here in the Central Valley, it's just, we're still hammering on the door of the courthouse because the courts are like the deer in the headlights. They've been trying to accommodate the pandemic, not very successfully either. So there are a lot of institutions that need to collaborate, and getting them to collaborate in the Central Valley, frankly, they don't care if it's the White House, right? This is not their president. So that's a whole other challenge. But
Right.
Like, who is the convener that's going to get the attention of the mayor and of the presiding judge? We always come to the meeting because help, but the people that really can change the landscape it's very difficult to get a hold of them. We haven't given up.
Yeah. So go ahead, Bruce. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to jump in and I'll be brief on this point. I think that in some ways I'm spoiled by, working for the city of Sacramento. We've got a mayor and a city council who have declared that housing is a human right. They're extremely progressive in protecting people in their ability to stay in their homes. They've been on top of this for a long time. There's a task force that works out of the mayor's office that deals with this. Our code enforcement stood up a specific unit to deal with landlords and tenant issues, and that's all they've concentrated on since the pandemic has started, in order to, because as patients have said, it's a very complicated process. So we've got a group of people who works with landlords, work with tenants, and I can't tell you personally how successful they are because I don't see the statistics on it, but it requires a focus. Yet, as patients have said, this is a really diverse state with a lot of different desires to either be, quote, independent or do their own thing. And, the political will may not be there. And while I think that Sacramento is going the right direction, and it's certainly not perfect, but I think it's going the right direction with the right intent, that we have such diversity within the state on how people comply or even want to comply, that for me, the only thing that's going to get everybody to the table is to keep putting bills out there from the state, which closes the loop on what local jurisdictions can do and must do. But it's a tough situation. And unlike the recession in 2010, this affected more people and affected them differently. And there has been a real sense of social need to create some equity in this process. So it's not perfect, but I think it's been more support than I would have ever thought would happen. Actually, after having gone through the 2010 recession and getting killed financially, I'm surprised at how the political will is standing up to take care of a broader range of people here.
So I want to ask, and maybe we'll either Patience or Sohab wants to weigh in on this one directly. Going along with the eviction protections, there was also an unprecedented, and Patience, you referenced this in your comments, unprecedented amount of funding that was made available for rental assistance. I mean, $5 billion infusion in rental assistance support is, something that I certainly would not fathom coming to the state in the time that I've read about housing. This also gets at a question that is in the chat that one of our audience members had. But there, it was directed in a kind of very particular way under very specific rules for particular circumstances. And, I know I wrote a story, and I'll just give this example that hopefully we can jump off of in the conversation, wrote about a family in San Francisco. The woman is a house cleaner, 3 kids, lost her job at the beginning of the pandemic. So there was no income there. Then her husband was working in a factory, got sick had to be out for a couple weeks. When he got better, his boss said, "Don't bother coming back." And so they very quickly were unable to pay their rent in San Francisco, right? And what they decided to do, which is very logical, was basically pay up whatever they could do, whatever they had, scrounge everything, and then move out and move in with the woman's mother. So then there were 10 people living in a 3-bedroom, right, as a result at the end of this. And this family, very clearly in dire need of rental assistance, under the rules of the rental assistance program, did not have access to it, could not access it because they were not behind on their rent. Right? That you had to be behind on your rent in order to access the rental assistance dollars. And so patients, I'm sure this example is something you saw dozens, if not, dozens of times in your experience. And maybe you could sort of speak to that. And then maybe Sohab as well. I'm not sure the extent to which, you've been involved or understand the state has been the primary driver in allocating this money, right? This $5 billion. It was very slow at the beginning, now seems to be picking up a little bit more. But, how do you address or work through situations like the one I just described, knowing that a lot of this money is by design not going to be able to get to the people who may need it the most?
So do you want to address that?
I can try. I did not oversee the rental assistance program, but what I do know is that was federal funds, partially federal funds that had their set of guidelines on how these funds are going to get implemented and out to the people who need it. But I will say, like with any program development, at least for us in my division, is we try to make sure it's as flexible as possible to address varying needs. Now, I'm on the planning side of things, not on the side where we're talking about rental assistance and homelessness unit. But I think that's the key here in public, federal and state policies to make sure we have programs that are not only addressing needs from, I need rental assistance because I've been late on my, or I have not been able to pay my rent, but also I don't think I'm going to be able to pay my rent tomorrow, but I'm trying, but I don't think I can. So is there assistance there for me? I think we do need to have programs that address both past needs and the current need as of today. And what might be coming up in the future, maybe I can pay my rent this month, but what about next month? What if I can't do it next month? What if I get sick, goodness gracious, but from COVID and I'm out of a job, or I don't have the resources to help pay my rent because I'm sick. So I'm not particularly sure, Liam, about how they implemented the program, but I do know that we do need to have flexibility in any federal and state policies and programs to make sure that it's getting out to the resources are getting out to people, not only to prevent what might happen in the future, but then to also address what's currently happening.
Right. What we've seen, the example you gave, Liam, is, we've seen a variety of similar kinds of situations where people borrow money from their parents, or, whatever. I mean, so they're way worse off at the end. So there are a few things. One is that we in the United States, if the public money is going to flow to white people, it's pretty seamless. If you own a house, it is really easy to deduct your mortgage interest on your tax return. It's really easy. Nobody comes with a microscope and like, excuse me, wait a minute, it was really only 77 cents, not 79 cents. You don't get that. If you're applying for some kind of welfare or some kind of public benefit that goes to poor people, which is to say largely people of color in our country, then, oh my gosh, the colonoscopy's got nothing, by comparison is an easy. So that attitude pervaded the way these funds were put on the street. That attitude, we are suspicious. We think people are gonna cheat. We don't trust the people who are getting this. We have to make them, they have to have 7 different kinds of documentation, and it has to be signed in a certain way, it has to be submitted in a certain way. We're not going to allow people to self-attest. I mean, it took months for the city of Fresno to even agree that maybe people should be able to self-attest to what's going on instead of having to produce a bunch of documents that PS they've gotten thrown out of their house, they don't have access to or whatever. So that's part of it. The other part of it is that we're not you can't, I think in the city of Fresno, last time I checked, it was something like 17% of the funds that had arrived in the city to be expended had actually been expended. And that means, and Kendra knows this, that means that translates to families on the street, and loss of employment, and children having to change schools, and all of that, all of what happens to you as a family when your housing is destabilized. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so that there was really kind of a disconnect, and it was a failure. It was a failure of the I-thou relationship between the people who had the money and the power, and the people who were supposed to benefit from the largesse of the rest of us, the taxpayers. And the result has been so awful, so tragic, and that's not hyperbole. So heartbreaking. And I don't know. There are places where it's being done right. I think in Texas, there's some huge developer, and they said, you know what, we own all these multifamily houses. We're going to make sure we get paid. And the developer took it on. We got calls. I got a call from the vice president of the California Apartment Association saying, hey, can you guys do the paperwork so that our people can get paid? I'm like, dude, who's going to get paid here? Can you put some skin in this game? And
right.
You actually have resources. So it was very complicated. It's not solved. It's still not solved.
Yeah. So we're running a little low on time, but I do know this is going to go on. I have to a very hard stop for me at right about 1 o'clock. So, but I do know there's going to be some conversation afterwards. So I'm going to leave. I'm going to ask one more question. If we have time for some of these audience questions, great. If not, maybe they'll be covered after I have to go. One more question, because this is something that we've been talking about, but haven't really addressed directly. I'm going to direct it to Sohab first, and then if everyone wants to weigh in afterwards, that would be great, or whoever wants to weigh in afterwards would be great. So every 8 years, cities across the state have to plan for new housing to meet population growth targets. This process is called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. And for decades, it's been seen as pretty toothless, since there are very few mechanisms for actual housing to get built after the fact, let alone ensure that sites that were designated for all this new growth were actually real. I did wrote about this in depth, process in depth a few years ago. I found that some cities would say that, malls that were fully leased up in their housing plans, they said that they would soon become these, big new multifamily developments, things like that. But in the last few years, there have been, has been referenced, sort of this wave of new laws aiming to strengthen this process. And right now we're sort of in the thick of it. And so Sohab, can you kind of talk to us a little bit about what's been happening right now and what's different about what's going on today from, say, 8 years ago?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I am well into the thick of it every day, all day. That's what we do. We're reviewing housing elements. Sometimes I refer to it as a housing plan. And we were reviewing it with a very fine comb, that every single law is met, and we're critiquing it, and we're looking at sites. So basically, like Liam kind of referred to in this document, cities are going to be identifying actual parcels, actual pieces of land that likely or hopefully will be built to accommodate a certain income group, lower, moderate, or above moderate. And oftentimes, it used to just be a paper exercise. They just, here's what we think, here's some programs, hope this works out in 8 years. We'll see you again 8 years later. But now we're saying, no, show us real sites. So show us parcels that not just have the planning feasibility, but also have the financial feasibility, right? And attached with the funding and the other mechanisms to actually develop housing on these sites. Another thing that is very different from 8 years ago is that HCD, just like Liam said, that this was somewhat of a toothless process. HCD has a lot of authority now to enforce these laws, and we will be using that authority. While we want to be a partner with local governments in helping them address these needs, we also need to come in and enforce these laws when they're not being practiced the way that they're supposed to. So right now, we actually just launched our accountability and enforcement unit. It's been around for a while, but we are hiring up to 25 people who are going to go through and see how cities are implementing these laws. And if not, we have certain fines, penalties, certain things that we can do to, and we will be using them to make sure that cities are enforcing these laws. You know, in the last couple of years, we handed out planning grants to cities and counties. We've been handing out incentives. We have technical assistance to work with them. But when those tools are not working, we do need other tools in our toolbox to say, okay, well, we've been able to provide you as much support as possible, but if you're not addressing these laws and complying and implementing them to the fullest extent, then we also need to come in and start coming in with fines and penalties and other types of work. Another big piece of this is what I think is huge is well, it's not new, but it's been reinforced as affirmatively furthering fair housing. And really what cities are being required to do is put into this housing element, this legal document, that, hey, here are certain practices that we have used in the past that have discriminated against people of color, against special needs populations, seniors, people with disabilities. And here's what we are very explicitly stating those things. And here's what we are going to do to address those needs and to undo what we've done in the past, whether it be government practices or even non-government practices, or even acknowledging, hey, we had a lot of community opposition in the last 50 years when it comes to affordable housing, and that's really kept people out of our community. We acknowledge it, and here's exactly what we're going to do to address it. And what we're looking for is not, oh, you know, we're going to come up with a plan and see if that works to address it. No, how are you going to do it? What are the steps you're going to take? What are you going to do if that plan's not working out? Okay, what's the funding that you have available? And we're going to come back in next year, the year after to see if that's actually happening. And I think it's a big deal because we're asking cities to acknowledge their past when it comes to redlining, when it comes to racist actions, when it comes to certain governmental actions that have very intentionally or unintentionally kept people of color and lower income families out of certain communities so that they can't access the great schools, the parks, the clean streets, the environment that people can thrive in. And so there's a lot of things HCD is going to, I mean, I could spend 45 minutes on this, but, you know, and I think we all know, but we will be coming in and working very directly with cities and counties to make sure that they're implementing all of the laws, SB 330, SB 35, density bonus, everything that they said in their housing elements. If you said you're going to rezone a site, we're going to want to see it rezoned. If you said you're going to reach out to developers on these sites to say, you know, hey, these sites are available, please let, you know, we can help you develop on these sites. We're going to ask you, have you done that yet? And show us how you've done it.
Wow. So I've got a long list for your accountability and enforcement unit.
Yeah.
I'll call you.
Sure.
So I'm gonna let, I think Bruce and Patience, it'd be great if you could address, Bruce, in terms of what you've been seeing in Sacramento, and Patience, what you've been seeing in the Central Valley by going through this process sort of more on the ground. I'm just gonna say thanks because I need to jump off right now, but hopefully this conversation can continue. So I appreciate the panelists and the invitation, and thanks so much for the invitation. But yeah, Bruce, please go ahead now and tell everybody what's going on.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. Because this is a discussion largely based on, you know, policies and what's possible. And there's this huge discrepancy, as I mentioned, between communities on who wants to do it and who wants to avoid it. And the carrot only goes so far in getting people to comply. So I think having a big hammer in the toolbox is really important. And HCD does now have a big hammer in the toolbox. And even as good as the city of Sacramento is, you know, we've got a big long-range planning group. There's probably 20 people in there, right? And this is something that we talk about all the time, and really doesn't matter whether it's the housing element or ADU compliance and things like that. People are not good. Public jurisdictions, communities are not going to come along until there is you have to do this kind of a thing. City of Sacramento has chosen to be a leader in this area. And we have what I believe is an outstanding housing element that just got approved. But not every jurisdiction is capable or has capable people to help create that, or even wants to be serious about it. So now that HCD can come in and say, you didn't comply, here's a fine, that will get people's attention a lot more than you didn't comply, so you're not going to get a grant this time, right? So there's only so much value you can get to get people with the program to understand how serious this is. The state of California has declared that we are in a housing crisis, and everything that can be done, everything that's possible to be done needs to be done, and every community needs to pull their weight. Not everybody's going to come to the table willingly. So if it takes the hammer in your toolbox, I honestly think that's a great idea, because we don't get out of this one jurisdiction at a time. We get out of this through the whole state pulling towards a common direction. And I think what, Patience has said, alluded to, exhibited emotionally, this is about people. It's not really policy. It's not really about what a government wants to do. It's really not what elected officials are doing. It's not really about, what community members don't like. This is lives of people. And we have to put that above everything else. And there's no rational reason why we as humans would not want to take care of other humans. And it has to come to that point where we have to embrace this. And we're going to embrace it because it's what we want to do, and we're going to make it work through policy, and then we're going to make sure that we enforce those policies to bring everybody along. People won't like it. I talk about it all the time, that change is difficult. And when people, see something changing in their neighborhood, they really rise up against it, and they forget, or they put aside their humanity. So the humanity controls here, the policy enables, and then the spirit of completing this is what makes it actually possible.
Thank you very much for those words, Bruce. Really appreciate it. I do want to break in just for a minute. I'm Andrew. I'm the president-elect here for Hornets Policy and Politics Alumni Chapter. And I think that's a great jumping point to talk about one of the reasons why we're here today. Our chapter is really here to bring forward these conversations and start having open discussion about what can be very uncomfortable topics, right? We've pulled in the history of racism, the decisions that have come out that have created this sort of discriminatory environment. And I really appreciate bringing it back to that people focus, that what we do here as policy professionals is not just fun and games, that there are people underlying it, right? There's a humanity to that. And I really appreciate that, because this has been a wonderful discussion. I really appreciate all the panelists being on here, and Liam for moderating, because we appreciate your viewpoints, and we're very happy to have this kind of conversation out there in the open. So I did want to take some time to turn towards some of the audience questions. I think some of them may have been covered already in our discussion, but one in particular that I saw come up that we haven't really talked about is in relation to outreach. How does the media coverage and portrayal of the housing crisis help people understand what's going on in their community? What is that media input, and how does that affect the conversation?
I really think, one thing that's missing in the media on like mainstream news channels and whatnot is the decision, where and when the decisions are being made, right? So decisions are being made at city council meetings about the housing element, about a specific project. Who holds the power? Your planning departments and your local elected officials. Maybe not planning departments so much, but local elected officials drive the agenda. So when they talk about the housing crisis, and if people are listening and they're like, okay, well, how do I get involved? How do I know more? How do we fix this? We're engaged. They don't talk about the piece where all the power is at the council meetings, and at when it comes to talking about specific projects, when it comes to talking about planning for housing, that's where it's being discussed, and that's where their voices, we need their voices, we need them to be heard, and maybe that their voices can be louder than those who are opposing housing. And so I think what's really missing is making sure that when we're describing and talking about even homelessness, we're also talking about the planning aspect about things, and that where we can possibly solve some problems when we engage the public when it comes to planning, and planning is happening at the local level.
So I think what's essential in order to harness that kind of, in order to create that kind of interest among the affected communities is robust community organizing. Because this is as people have alluded to, it's a complex area. There's a lot of jargon. Things happen, lot of things happen behind closed doors, those informal meetings between the planner and the developer who's interested possibly in taking an option on this piece of property, and what might happen between the developers and the members of the city council or the board of supervisors. So in order to get a seat in the decision-making process, it's community organizing. There's just no alternative to it, because it's a mechanism for people to get educated, to be alerted to what's going on. It really is it's self-protection, but it's complicated enough that that's not obvious. And so where we live, to the extent that we've made progress, my hat is off to Faith in the Valley and a couple of other organizations, Leadership Council, who have just been relentless, and thank goodness. But that also attracts media attention, which then ends up educating the rest of the community. So it's a virtuous circle in that way.
Andrew, I want to throw something else in there. Just occurred to me. The city has been pursuing what we call missing middle housing, which would include multiple units on single family lots, essentially eliminating R1 zoning. It has received huge pushback from neighborhoods. And what we've seen is a lot of media coverage of it, which is not all correct. It's a little bit sensational. And I think that sometimes media tends to put out what's going to grab people's attention rather than a good factual understanding of a particular topic, because the story we tell in planning about the values of eliminating R1 zoning or multiple units in R1 zoning, and how it helps balance the systemic racism and redlining of the past, and how it creates an opportunity for more people to use already established services and resources and parks and all of the other things, and how it allows us to create more units at a lower infrastructure cost. These are all things that don't necessarily get told in the story. It's about they're taking away our neighborhood. So I think the media has a responsibility to, I hate to say it, put out this sort of balanced understanding, a nuanced understanding of particular topics rather than ones that just grab headlines.
I do think that harkens back to what we talked about earlier, that you don't want to have the technical jargon blocking people out, but also you want to find that balance of allowing them to have that input, right? To be able to connect with the issue and understand. And so I know we could spend a whole hour just on this topic alone, so I'll move on to another question at this point. Another group that's involved here that we have a question about is, how has organized labor been a part of this? How has it helped or hindered legislative efforts to promote more affordable housing? And are there prevailing wage issues? Have those disincentivized developers? If you'd like to speak to that.
Well, SB 35 exempts projects under 10 units from an affordable housing component and from prevailing wage. When Sacramento adopted its own ministerial housing project, we specifically left those two out of our program. And we felt that while the affordable housing component was important and a good living wage was important, the idea that if we can go out there and add a couple of thousand more units through a simpler process, everybody eventually is going to benefit from that. So for us, it was really important to have a really simplified, streamlined process. And it's tough because you have to balance this idea that there needs to be a good living wage for people to do well in their lives. And you balance that against the overall cost of development construction. And clearly it's less expensive to build things that are not prevailing wage. Does it keep projects from happening? No, I don't think so. I don't think that that's a component because a lot of projects do get built that way. I think that it's important to have multiple paths, and you have to have multiple paths to different kinds of housing, whether it be ADU or larger multifamily projects, of getting things out there for people to use and live in. So I personally think that we cannot succeed on the backs of people working for low wages. I just don't think that that's a reasonable thing to do. But there's a balance in there. And I think the balance is okay where it is right now. It's more, the cost of materials have gone up more than the cost of labor in the last 4 years. And that's been the big issue, the big sticking point in cost of construction.
Thank you. That's very interesting.
That's a really good point. Well, go ahead.
Oh, no, if you'd like to respond back to that, go ahead.
Well, every penny that gets added to the total cost makes it more difficult to pencil, makes it more difficult to house the people who are really most desperately in need of housing. And before I became management in my current job, I used to be a union member back when I was a legal aid staff attorney. And I'm a firm believer in unions. I don't know what the middle ground is. It seems there's, everyone's got to have some skin in the game, and a kind of relentless, I agree with Bruce. We do not want to be the state that builds our affordable housing using labor of people who need to live in our affordable housing. That's not right. But it's a very thorny problem, and I don't know the solution, but we just have to look in the face the fact that every additional increment of cost makes it more difficult to house poor people.
Yeah, we used to have redevelopment, and redevelopment helped put the public sector into financing of affordable housing projects. We don't have that tool anymore. And it's not reasonable to go to the development community and say, you have to build all the affordable housing. I mean, that's not their business, not their business model. So there is the realization that public jurisdictions, cities, communities, counties, townships need to be a participant, whether it's about putting up land, whether it's about providing some financing, whether it's deferral of fees or elimination of fees. As Patient said, every dollar counts. So if you take $100,000 of fees out of a project, or $1 million of fees out of a project, that all helps. And that's what local jurisdictions can do through policy. We have a fee deferral program, so you don't have to pay the fees through construction financing. You can pay them out of permanent financing. We have, for affordable housing components, there's a fee waiver process. And now we're taking some of the federal funding and putting that into supporting housing. So government has to be a participant in the solution. They can't just enable it through better policy. They have to be a player. You have to have some skin in the game. So that's how we're going to get there.
Really appreciate that. I think that's a good jumping off point to one of our other questions as well. As a non-housing expert, maybe you could help us clarify some of this, because I've heard this question from others. How can we potentially use vacant commercial space and maybe incentivize conversion to mixed use development or something along those lines? Because again, what we're here to talk about is what can we do, right? What can we do to address the problems?
So the easiest thing you can do is what we did in 2013, is you allow residential in every zone. The only zone that the city of Sacramento has where you can't use or can't do residential is heavy industrial. So if you're in a commercial zone and you've got an old defunct, retail building, or an office building that's no longer, viable from an economy, and economies change and uses change. It used to be that you couldn't just decide you were going to convert an office building to residential. The city of Sacramento, you can. We don't look at change of use from commercial to residential as a problem relative to planning. We think it's great. If we want to populate commercial areas, commercial strips with people and houses, that's wonderful. We want to take out the difficulty, the time, the cost in being able to do residential wherever you find a good piece of property. Now, from a building standpoint, there's always a technical change of use, but residential is a lower impact than commercial. And so exiting and seismic upgrades and all like are much simpler to handle. So when a public jurisdiction steps up and eliminates the barrier to adaptive reuse. And remember, adaptive reuse is what we want to do from sustainability. All of these existing buildings have embodied energy in them. We don't want to tear them down, throw away the material, and then go create a whole bunch of new material expenses. We want to reuse what's there. Buildings already exist where there's services with police and fire services and water and sewer and electric. And we don't want to go to a greenfield and have to create all that new. So you want to create policies that enable and encourage. City of Sacramento got rid of change in parking requirements. So if you came into an area that was a commercial and it needed to be residential or a bar and it had to have a bunch of parking, we just waived that requirement because we don't want to get in the way of that adaptive reuse. So policies enable an easier path.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, the same exact thing is we've seen only a handful of cities right now to implement adaptive reuse policies. You know, in the housing element, a lot of cities are saying like, hey, we're going to convert commercial into mixed use, or we're going to convert these empty vacant buildings into residential, or that's likely to happen. But we're looking at, well, what are the policies to help encourage that? Adaptive reuse is a great strategy, especially also we've seen that for those who are fortunate, a lot of people are working from home and offices are empty. My building right now is like for 1,000 people and there's like 10 of us in here, right? And it's been, yeah, I know, what a waste, right? And it's been like 10 of us for 2 years. So it's just, you know, there's a lot of empty buildings, empty office buildings that can possibly be live work lofts and spaces. And so same thing that Bruce is saying, adaptive reuse strategies and policies at the local level is a great way to utilize what is currently underutilized buildings and vacant warehouses, industrial and commercial.
So I think my follow-up question on that is, then why do we not see that happening right now? Right? Have that underutilized space? Are we missing tools? Is there a policy change? You know, what's going on that we're not seeing that change over?
I mean, that's a great question, Bruce, please. Yeah, I was going to defer to you on what do you see not happening or happening, given that you've implemented some of these the policies?
Well, you've got jurisdictions that make this really difficult based on, you know, we don't want that. We don't want residential in the middle of a commercial zone. Just don't mix them up. Planning along, if you go far enough back, you know, it was retail downstairs and you lived upstairs and the stable was at the end of the street, right? And everybody kind of worked together. Planners decided everything needed to be separated. You got to live out here and you got to work over here and you got to make things over here. And that's a counterproductive policy from a planning standpoint. We've gotten back to this idea that if you put everything together in the same place and you do a mix of everything, we talk about mixed use, but mix everything, right? You don't need a car, you don't have to drive around. You've got all kinds of, you know, benefits out of having people living and working together in the same place. So the first is to quit creating discriminatory policies which separate things. The second reason why this becomes problematic is that it can be expensive to take an older building and convert it to a new use, because your local jurisdictions are usually looking for you to upgrade to current code. So mechanical, electrical, and perhaps even seismic, you know, gets thrown out. So you need a jurisdiction that's willing to look at the impact that the new use has. And it's critical because if you're going from, let's call it an office use to an assembly use, you got a whole lot more people. The impact is greater, more people at risk, higher seismic. You're going to a lower impact, it's less necessary to come to full upgrades. And the last is that you need to provide bonuses, density bonuses, to come into an existing location and use an existing building and provide some incentives to do that, whether it's an FAR bonus or a unit bonus, that, and perhaps even some fee waivers. These are important tools to incentivize a person, because when you come to an urban location to build, it's more expensive than greenfield. So you have to provide the offsets to get people to do it.
Appreciate that. So I think let's turn to a different topic. One of the questions our audience had was, can rental caps aid in the control of increased rental fees? We talked about, you know, a lot of what was done during the pandemic on eviction protection, but I don't know if Patience, you might want to be the first to respond to that.
Well, when that happens in Fresno, we will also be celebrating the second coming. It's just the politically DOA, and yeah, and we've seen rents just since the pandemic. I think the last figure I heard was 37%, but that was last week, so it's higher now. It is even more difficult for people to pay their rent than it was 2 years ago, for the same and possibly worse housing. So yeah, rental cap is a great idea. I think personally that view isn't shared by anybody who's an elected official in my environment. So I don't know how it would happen.
Yeah, politically in Sacramento, there was actually a local election which included rental caps, which was not successful. And I think the concern is that if you, so building is a profit business, the same as selling sausages or bread, right? You know, you do it because it's your business and you expect to make a profit, support your family. So the development industry is there to make a profit so they can continue to do more. And there was a very real concern that if you created uncertainty in the market and took away the opportunity for people to make a fair profit in the future, and remember, not everybody holds on to the projects that they build, they will eventually sell them. And if you cap the value of that project, you disincentivize building. So it's a two-edged sword. You might be able to stabilize rents for a period of time, but you also might end up restricting what gets built and therefore creating a housing shortage in the future. Sacramento now has some of the highest rents in the country. And it's not because of lack of trying, lack of building, but we're seeing a big influx from the Bay Area due to the fact that we're all working online now, right? So it doesn't matter where you work. I've heard recently, you know, we're right there with New York and Washington, D.C. for rents. So imagine if the flow of new construction stopped and we didn't build new houses, where we would be in a couple of years. And so I think that's the concern and that's the balance. And these are always really challenging things. And for me, I think there's better policies to try and make rents fair and stabilized than just artificially capping them.
Thank you.
Tough subject.
Yeah, I mean, you see in our name, policy and politics, right? It goes hand in hand. You can't separate the two out. And so we do have to consider both sides of that coin. So thank you for bringing that up. I think one of our other questions was, what role do homeowners play in the housing crisis, and how should the state be providing assistance for them, you know, aside from just the renters? I know we talked about how, you know, homes are a significant source of wealth, right, for families as well. So if you'd like to respond back to that.
I do want to say that there are foreclosures coming. There were protections, they have expired. I think the foreclosure period is approximately 90 days to bring a foreclosure all the way to an auction. And so, yeah, we expect to see a lot of folks who've lost their jobs losing their homes too. One of the things we're working on doing here is creating a community land trust that can insert itself into this process and hopefully help homeowners preserve some of their equity and stay in their home while the land trust owns the ground underneath, which reduces the value or the price of that the homeowner has to pay. But that's that's one tool, and it's, I don't know, 10 units a year. I don't know. It's not the solution, but efforts to see. I would want to see the state figure out, like, how can we keep homeowners from losing those years of investment, which that's the family wealth building mechanism, right? It still is less than it used to be, but it still is. And so I agree that this is something I don't know what state policymakers are thinking about, but it's an issue. It's not as bad as 2008, but it's, and there's been some legislative fixes, big corporations can no longer go in and batch buy at foreclosure auctions, stuff like that, that make it more difficult to divest residential, homeowners from residential property owners from losing their property.
Andrew, I did two thoughts, maybe three. One is, I think every homeowner should have an ADU on their property, whether it's for their family or extended family or renters, students, whatever. I mean, everyone should have it. I think every homeowner should step up and support sharing their neighborhoods through increased density. The idea that these are not exclusive enclaves for those who got theirs and want to exclude everybody else. And they need to step up and support policies that allow for more people to share the amenities that are already there. And the last thing that has occurred to me, that I would like to see the state change policies relative to liability laws for condominiums. One of the things that is problematic now is if you were to take a home in a single family neighborhood and create 4 units out of it, one of the great things to do would be able to create a condominium ownership of that, where people can come in and they could share and they can begin to build some equity, some real estate equity. But right now, the process, other than a group ownership that you put on title, the ability to build something with condominium laws and condominium liabilities, well, it never happens anymore because there's too much risk. And if the risk were removed through some state law changes, we would have the opportunity for people to share in smaller units at a lower entry cost, and where their money can, a rent to own kind of a model, where what they're paying goes in towards buying where they're living. So we need to think a little bit differently about home ownership and home ownership entry and the barriers that are artificially created through the liabilities of condominium development.
So I think we're coming up near the end of our time. I know we had a couple of questions we didn't get to, but I wanted to offer you both the opportunity to give some closing thoughts if you have any other pieces of information you'd like to pass along to our audience. Patience, if you'd like to start off with that.
I just appreciate that folks are showing up and spending their lunch hour on, nerding out on these housing policy issues. I love that. And all of we can take advantage of every bit of cross-pollination that we can engineer, learning from each other and teaching each other. So right now when I get off, I'm going to call Sohab and see about her enforcement unit over there. Thank you. It's been a delight and I've really appreciated it.
And thank you very much for participating. I appreciate having you nerd out here with us, definitely.
Yeah, and I want to thank you personally and for the city of Sacramento to be able to talk today. And the one thing that I would like to pass along for anyone out there thinking about these is that you have to know the why. Why are we doing anything? And that why has to be the most common, most basic concern that we want to work on. And all the rest is how we get to that why. So if we're honest and clear and humane about that why, the policies will come along. It's work, it's hard work, but you got to have a real commitment to the why.
Yes, definitely. I know we talked quite a bit about that today, and I appreciate that we really focus on the human element here, and what we can do, because this is a crisis. It's our shared crisis. So thank you both for taking the time to be here today. I know we lost the others somewhere in the panel, but appreciate it. We'll have this up on our site. And Kayla, if you'd like to give your last closing remarks here.
Just wanted to thank you for making this a wonderful panel and providing such a robust and honest conversation around this. I know sometimes it's hard to walk that fine line between honesty and correctness. So this was a great way to handle that. And thank you again for your expertise and sharing that out. We really look forward to letting you know when this goes up so that you can see and revisit this conversation as often as you'd like.
And we, of course, look forward to the continuing conversation.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
we know how many problems in policy there are out there to solve. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.